Hi, my name is Auntie. I'm born and bred in Porirua, and I'm here it's actually a privilege to be able to give testimony for the help and assistance that I received from Bill Subritzky back in early 1985. At that time I was only 18 years old. I had given birth to my first child, a baby girl, and from the time she was born she had to be brought up in an incubator because she couldn't breathe the air that you and I are breathing. She had to have oxygenated air, and we didn't know why. Specialists in that had said that we've got an airway channel, and for some reason she didn't seem to have one similar to us. I didn't quite understand. As I said, I was only 18 years old. All I knew is that my baby couldn't breathe the air that we were having to have. So she was born like that and in an incubator. And it does get to you after a while with not being able to do things. Seeing other people with their babies getting better was the hardest. Was seeing other people coming in with their babies and leaving with their babies. But I couldn't even hold my baby, and that was the hardest thing of all, not just for me, but for the entire family. My daughter's father ended up leaving me after that because I don't think he could handle just being watched and supervised, is how it seemed, for both of us. While we were there in the hospital, my auntie and her man had come, my uncle had come in, and were talking to my mum and said that there's a faith healer by the name of Bill Subritzky coming into the Wellington Town Hall that night, and that they wanted my mum and I to consider bringing baby in to see this faith healer, because we've tried all the medical ways and they didn't seem to know what was wrong with her and didn't know how to fix her. And my auntie was begging that we take her to this guy Bill Subritzky, as she felt that he'd be able to help us. It just took a lot of organising, because in order for us to get there we needed an ambulance as well as the incubator in there. There was also having to organise oxygen tank. Now in those days they didn't have the little small portables that we have today. The one we came in with was the big huge tanks that divers use or that the firemen had, and we had to bring it in on a trolley, and my baby had the mask on her face. So we left the hospital about 9 o'clock in the ambulance. We got to the town hall and it was just chocker. I mean, even for the ambulance to get in, there was cars all over the place, people all over the place. Inside the town hall would have been chocker, because outside there were just people galore. You couldn't even get in if you wanted to. And they had two big huge speakers on the outside, and you could hear them talking on it. But the ambulance pulled up with our red lights on and everything, and we started walking towards the crowd where all these people were. Now at that time it only seemed like we were there probably 10-15 minutes, and all I heard come over the speakers was, "Could everyone please be quiet? God's sending me a message," is what the voice said. And I just cracked up laughing, thinking, oh geez, what a joke. And the voiceover says that there's a baby out there that's finding it hard to breathe, that was born like this, and God is calling for this child to come forward. So if you have this child, please bring the child forward. Now my mum and I both looked at each other to think, well, are they talking about us? But then I said to my mum, "It's okay, Mum, I'm sure Auntie went and rung ahead and told them we were coming." And about a couple of minutes later, the voice over the speakers started getting a lot more sterner, and he says, "There is a child in this room," and then he went on to state and gave a total description of my daughter's blanket. It was a handmade blanket. And that he says this child is wrapped in this blanket, and even went on about the oxygen tank and other things that the child had. Now everyone started looking around, and then you had people outside saying, "Here they are, they're over here." And it was just amazing. It was kind of like you had all these people around and just a big huge opening opened for us. So we all walked down with the paramedic with us with our oxygen tank and the baby. And we got down to the bottom of the stage. By that, I just had the shakes, I couldn't go up. Mum went up for me with baby and the paramedic. when they got up there, the man had just put his hands out over my daughter like that, closed his eyes and opened them and just flung back. And I thought, heck. And he looked at my mother and he says, "Are you the mother of the child?" And she goes, "No, I'm the grandmother. The mother's down there," pointing at me. And then he looked at my mother and he says, "The mother of the child is dabbling in voodoo and witchcraft." And I looked up at him and I thought, far out, how the heck could he know that? You know, he continued to put his hand over my daughter, and he came out and told my mother that I had the Rider Wyatt collection of the tarot cards, gave a description, a full description, and the title of the Ouija board that I had. He also gave the 12 titles of books that I had on witchcraft, voodoo, tarots, as well as also psychic insights. And he gave the authors as well with these titles, and I was standing there at the bottom shaking, thinking, oh my God, how the heck did you get to know all of that? But as they continued going over her like that, he kept coming out with new things. And then he says that these things are being kept in a specially made room, is what he said. I told my mother that these books and that have been hidden, and a secret room was made, and he told my mother where it was, inside my wardrobe. And again, I mean, I didn't know what to think. I just thought, wow, how the heck could you know that? Now, my brother's a carpenter, and he built that room in that wardrobe for me to hide my things like that, because, you know, my mother's really strict in discipline and culture, and I knew that if she found me dabbling in that sort of thing, I'd get a good hiding. So, you know, my brother was nice enough to build that for me. So that's all right. They did all of that, and we ended up back at the hospital at 11:30. We got back with baby, and my mother made sure that we were under lock and key until she went home and got all these things out of the wardrobe. And back in those days, you were able to light your incinerators and burn whatever you liked. At 1 o'clock that morning, my mother had rung the hospital to speak to me and asked how we were, how baby was, and says, "We're fine. She's no better, no different." She says, "Well, I've just burnt your last book." That was at 1 o'clock. I went to sleep. About 2 o'clock, about an hour later, I was woken up with the incubator alarms going off, and got up to have a look, and the nurses and that come running in. And by the time we got up to have a look at her, she was blue. In other words, she'd stopped breathing inside the tank. And we were thinking, wow, without thinking, we had just opened up the lid and started doing CPR on her, and she came right. But as soon as we go to close the lid back down for her to breathe, she'd stopped breathing again, and we couldn't understand it. So the specialist that was already on his way in had come in, and we were doing CPR on her for the 4th time, trying to get her back into the incubator. And the specialist had says, "Well, leave her for a minute." So they did, and for some reason, trying to put her back into the incubator, she wouldn't take to it, but she was able to breathe our ear, and the specialist couldn't understand it. He just couldn't. I couldn't, but he couldn't understand it. And so that's all right. 2 days later, we went in to have her X-ray to find out how things were going, and you know why she was all of a sudden now able to breathe this air that we were breathing. She no longer needed to have a purified air. And when they took the X-ray, as I'd mentioned earlier on, she didn't have an airway passage like we had. It was, you know, but in the X-rays, for some reason, the airway passage was there. They couldn't explain it. I couldn't explain it either. Now, my mother gave her heart to the Lord. It changed my mother's life dramatically. My mother wasn't a drunk, always out partying, having fights, you name it, she was doing it. But that night, my mother gave her heart to the Lord, and she continued to until the day she died of breast cancer, and that was 16 years of faithful servicing. 25 years later, my daughter is still well and breathing. I have 3 beautiful grandchildren with her, and they're all fit and healthy and doing really well.